Can the department outline whether a marine protected area, supported by the necessary ecological evidence, could independently provide a lawful basis for restricting or stopping commercial fishing by large vessels which is 6 nautical miles, for example, in the Shannon estuary? Should the policy directive banning such activity be successfully challenged in the courts?
Thank you, Deputy, for that question. I think the purpose and I suppose the principal objective of marine protected areas is to, benefit and enhance marine biodiversity and the marine environment for those benefits for all. And that's the objectives that we're working towards in it. In respect of fishing as part of that, I think we spoke earlier around, the design and the creation of these MPAs will be done in consultation for the betterment of all, and we'd hope the benefits for all as well. So they're the kind of principles that we're working towards. In terms of fisheries policy specifically, it's not a competence of our department and a policy area for our department. So all of the legislation will be done, will be kind of created and drafted from our perspective that will align with what the legislation exists already from a fisheries perspective. So we have to show faith to that in respect of what we're developing in our legislation through marine protection, and aligning that with what exists already from a fisheries policy perspective. We don't have the policy ownership in respect of that fisheries piece within the Department of Climate, Energy and Environment. What we're focusing on is implementing a procedure and developing an MPA network that has, I think, benefits for all, and that those benefits are derived from participation by everybody in the process.
Yes, yeah.
Deputy, I can just maybe offer a comment on that as well, if that's okay. Your question is whether there could be restrictions on larger vessels due to proximity or entrance into a special protection area in SIC. I believe that's your question.
Yes, correct, yeah.
If the fishing activities were subject to an appropriate assessment of those activities, then yes, it depends on the actual assessment outcome, on the impacts to the qualifying interests, and Shannon estuary would be very important for dolphins. So therefore, there's the potential, yes, I would say, if that activity was assessed.
So there would actually be concern.
I mean, it's, when you do an appropriate assessment, you're looking at all of the activity, what the volume of fish being taken out, what are the impacts then to the species in question, and knowing what the ecology is of that species and how they are dependent on certain, maybe a biomass of fish in that area. So through the process, if that process is in place, then yes, it is a tool that could be used, yes.
Thank you. Now, I presume Seafood Ireland, from a conservation perspective, do you believe that the different levels of protection within the MPA framework can be applied in a phased or adaptive way to support the recovery of marine ecosystems, while also enabling a substantial inshore small boat fisheries over time? Could an approach that begins with higher protection, allowing no or very limited fishing, and then gradually adjust protection levels in response to demonstrable improvements in conservation conditions, be considered compatible best practice conservation principles? What would your views?
I think essentially the short answer is more or less yes. The principles that we would follow, or we would like to see followed here, are that we work together, we identify the features, When we have the features identified, we know what the threats are against those features, whether that feature is a physical feature or a fish stock or whatever. So we identify those features, and then we would design the management of a marine protected area in order to protect that feature. So if you're trying to protect something on the bottom, it's obvious. If you're trying to protect something that's on the surface, like seabirds or whatever, you have a different set of solutions. And I think, when we enter into this process of co-designing these MPAs, I think that's the space we need to get into, where we identify between us, firstly, what are the features we need to protect, and then how do we protect them. After that, you're looking at areas, and when you look at areas, you need to consider the socio-economic impact of that on the existing activities within that area, Deputy. And I think in that scenario, we need to have a proper and full socio-economic impact assessment for each of these MPAs to identify potential losses for any seafood activity that is going on there, and how do we replace those losses to that sector while still establishing our MPAs and protecting our features. That's the task at hand. How do we ensure the established income of these operators within an area is either allowed to continue or is replaced to allow a full and proper coexistence to occur between the marine protected areas and the existing activities that are in those areas. Thank you.
Yeah, so to broaden out your question for me is, first of all, you have to identify the impacts of what the fishing activity is inside in an area. Like, as you said, big boats versus small boats. First of all, you evaluate what is the difference between a big boat and a small boat. So you'd start there, because without that knowledge or data, then you can't act. If one boat is using just a smaller net but taking the same amount of fish, but he's doing it more regular than the other boat, then the impact is the same. So I think that answers one aspect of your question. And the other aspect of your question is you're asking what's our views on the industry on this. When this came about first, we actually were the only producer organisation, the Irish South and West, to come up with a paper that we wanted to sit down with all the people that are around us here to form a management plan. Because if you don't form a management plan, then what you're saying is there should be no fishing. So if you're saying there should be no fishing, that's a different conversation that we're having. As John just said, these people like myself have fished for generations, and we've continued to do, and every time a law or a new regulation comes in, if we don't comply, we're put in jail for that. So we want to work, as John said, with the development of many management strategies that will allow us to continue to do what our ancestors and our family members have done before us. We don't see that what we're doing is bad. Now, of course, do we adapt and change throughout the years and adapt what's going on around us? Of course, that's the same. Fishermen use different type of nets. They go to different size areas. They use different boats because they have to access different fish and different opportunities. If fish are inside in an area and it's only available in that area, to say that a small boat can go in there, fair enough. But to say that the small boat is going in there because he's going to do less damage than the bigger boat, then you'll have to show that. What you're doing is you're actually denying the bigger boat for going into somewhere he's going for maybe 40 or 50 years, just because he seems to be bigger and can be seen more from the shore than the smaller vessel. That's the issue that we have. So we want managed fisheries. We want to be able to continue to manage fisheries. We have actually been frustrated by the changes that has come from the cuts to our fish stocks in our Irish waters, where we weren't part of the consultation with the Commission, the European Commission, on new changes to fishing gear and methods, because we would have improved them and increased them, because we don't think they're adequate enough. But we want them applied not just to our fleet, as we've pointed out, but to other fleets in other jurisdictions, because we then will do the work, but others will benefit, because we've 15%, they have 85%. So if we recover the stocks, they get 85%. So we believe they should share the burden. So does that answer the question, Deputy?
Yes, that answers the question, and thank you very much. Okay.
Cooney, Fair Seas just wanted to respond to that question as well.
Thank you, Deputy. Yes, we've also called for the legislation to define the different protected areas categories, because there is a difference between a fully no-take zone and those areas which do allow varying levels of extractive activities. And we would agree with what John has said about ensuring that each site has its own individual and specific detailed management plan, and taking those decisions on a case-by-case basis and considering which activities impact the environmental objectives for certain sites, and then taking that ecosystem-based approach to look at the full ecosystem, whereas the SPAs and SACs that exist now are features-based, just looking at those specific features, whereas we would call for a full look at the entire ecosystem of specific sites. But again, those specific detailed management plans are very important for that and determining the different levels of protection within each.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response.
Deputy Connolly.